I'm your host, Victoria Turner, and this is Powerful People of San Diego. We have a great show for you today. We're talking about games, board games, gaming in general, and we have an amazing individual, Mr. Ken Hodkinson, who has invented 50 years ago an amazing game called Bin Fa. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And I see you brought this beautiful young lady with you.
My partner.
Oh, your daughter too.
That's correct.
Erica Bird, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. We're very happy to be here.
Now, creating a game independently is a big, big deal. It's really difficult to do. And then you managed to create not one, but two games. Tell me about the Bin Fa game.
Well, it started, as we said, 50 years ago. I had a very boring job in a factory operating a machine. And because it was so boring, I started thinking about a board game. And I thought, the cavalry charge, so that was the starting point. I started with that and added to it incrementally. It all comes from the unconscious, by the way. I just have to be patient, and sooner or later, another idea pops into my head, and I say, yes, that's right.
That's right.
Yeah.
How long did it take you to put it all together?
Well, the most recent change, which was just 2 years ago, I saw a 6-colored dice. And immediately I thought, that's the weather die.
Ah, that's how it applies to your game.
Previously, the weather had not been a factor in the game. But when I saw that, I thought, now when it's your turn, you roll the dice, whichever color's uppermost is off limits because of bad weather for that turn. So it introduced it, and that was the most recent. Who knows what the future holds?
What's going to keep going on?
Well, the history.
Let's talk about how the game developed here.
Well, the game has evolved so much over its 50 years in development. This was the very original game that my dad produced in 1971 called Bin Fa, the Tao of War. And I think you just raised money from friends and family to get it.
There was Avalon Hill, a big games company, to which I sold it eventually. But they put out instructions, to inventors. What you should do. Number one, play with your family and friends. Well, if you can't get them interested, forget about it. Get them on board. Now talk about maybe they'd like to invest a little money, which is what I did. I think I raised $5,000.
In 1970.
Yeah, that was
good money then,
those days, yes.
And made a showcase production of 500 games, which is that one there. And
then how did you interest the Avalon Hill people in it?
Well, he mailed that one in the 1980s, and it's an interesting story, actually, how that came about. It went into a slush pile with numerous other games that they received. It was one of the biggest bookshelf game producers of the 1980s. Wow. And they
changed the whole thing. So this is something that gaming people have got to be frustrating.
It is frustrating when you go and picked up by a company and they do want to make changes. Yeah. And they renamed it Hexagony because the original shape of the game was a static hexagon board.
Well, Alan Moon, who is a legend in the games industry, Ticket to Ride is his most recent one, and he had just started working at Avalon Hill. His first job. He was so poor, he slept in the office. He couldn't afford an apartment. And his first job was to go through the slush pile, an entire room filled with games. He went through it, read the rules, reduced it to 12, test played those 12 games, and Bin Fa was one of the two that emerged from it.
Wow, he really went through.
So it's quite a process.
Yeah, rose to the top, so to speak.
Yes.
Yeah.
And at one point, I think you also went to one of the really big companies like Hasbro or Parker Brothers.
Parker Brothers. No, it's interesting, yeah. It wasn't Bin Fa, it was another game based on the I Ching. But we managed to get the vice president in charge of product acquisition at Parker Brothers.
Wow, that's pretty amazing.
Happen?
Yeah.
I had a connection. I knew somebody. Anyway, so we finally get in to see him. Describe it to him. He shakes his head. He said, "No, it sounds like a wonderful game you got there." He said, "But we're not selling the steak. We sell the sizzle." So there was too much steak and not enough sizzle.
Right.
So from there, this was with Avalon Hill for a number of years until their company eventually went bust, and Dad got the copyright back. And in 2000, when he was living in New Hampshire, he launched
the third manifestation.
The third manifestation, again with some changes, which was the Seacoast Limited Edition Tube Edition. And then just a few years ago, we launched what is now the hopefully final incarnation.
The major change up until that time, the playing area had been a locked-in hexagon.
Right.
It occurred to me,
a
it doesn't
static.
have to be locked in like that. You could break it up and then have infinite variations.
Sure.
Yeah,
so that's very unique.
That's
Instead of a static hexagon.
So now we have inlets and lakes and,
So the lesson here is for people who are developing their own game is to be open to the changes that will occur over years or what your subconscious might bring to you.
Absolutely. It's all your unconscious.
We had the same with this game here, the reading game,
But this is very, very different. Now,
very different type of game.
This game is about the strategy. Military strategy.
A full game with 3 armies aside would take you about 2 hours.
Okay.
And it would require intense concentration. This is the other end of the spectrum.
For kids.
It's for beginning and struggling readers. It's all about getting reading ready for kindergarten and helping those kids that are struggling with reading in their later years. But again, we came out with what we thought would be the definitive game, and with feedback from shopkeepers at Barnes & Nobles, from families, from teachers, from parents, we made changes to the second edition by adding in a set of flashcards, changing the box color to yellow.
Let me just interrupt here, because the people in this business are so helpful. Everybody involved, they really want to help. Information, anything they can do. Is a wonderful camaraderie in the business.
That's great.
And you see that when you go to conventions.
Let's talk about conventions. Now, the gaming industry is a $12 billion industry, so this is not like somebody in the backyard anymore. This is big, big bucks.
Well, there's been a big renaissance in the gaming industry, and I think part of it has to do with organizations like Kickstarter. Because as Dad said, with his experience with Parker Brothers, they just want things that they can do in a 30-second add-on the TV, like Hungry Hungry Hippos.
Sure.
Something that sells really quickly, or classic games. So to get through that product development stage with a big company like that is really difficult. And Kickstarter allows game inventors to come on, get a game listed, and other gamers can then back that game and get it out there. And I think that that's been partly responsible for that resurgence in the games industry. And now there are over 50 gaming conventions in states across America with meetings every single month. And here's just a list of some of the few big ones. We've got Board Game Geek, and they mix around the country. Geekway, which is in St. Louis every year, and one for Southern California, Strategicon, which is the largest one that takes place in Los Angeles.
I've got a figure here, Kickstarter. They funded the first half of 2018, $70 million raised in Kickstarters.
So
it's huge.
It's huge, yeah. And so it stopped being a funnel where one guy makes a decision to the people in the industry who know a lot about the particular
and other
game.
gamers. So other gamers back those games, and it is a great way for people that are interested in game design to get games out in the market. And just as an example, it's a bit fuzzy, but these gaming halls, I mean, these conventions attract maybe 5,000 people, and it's 24 hours a day of gaming for 5 days, and each of them have huge games libraries. And we always hold, at the Geekway convention that we go to in St. Louis, we hold a Binfa tournament. And this is where we have the tournament. And
so many people participate in that.
So many people participate. We have different heats, and it goes on throughout the day.
There's an interesting story about that.
Yes.
2 years ago, we started this annual tournament at the Broadway Geek in St. Louis. Wonderful in every May. And we had this, I put up a $500 prize, and we had a tournament. I think we had 16 people signed up. Signed up into 8 games, and $500, that's a lot of money.
That's good money.
And one of the games, I think it was the 3rd round, both players were deadlocked. They were reduced to just 4 units. You start out with 12. And theoretically, you can still play, but you can't win.
Right.
So it became a game now of trying to outweight the other party, and they just diddled around, you know. But eventually the other guy's going to give up. I had to step in and say, we've got to. So I said, well, you'll each get 4 extra units, and find out which we did that. So it was all that. But it wasn't, I thought there's a flaw here. If this can happen, how do you solve the problem? Well, it used to be when you get supplies by moving around the supply sector. You roll the dice, depending on how it rolls, you get supplies from the main supplies. Or you can steal them from other players.
Right.
But there's no charge for them. I thought, if you had to pay 10 cents a supply, $1, whatever.
Yeah.
Now you were not just going to diddle-daddle to kill time, because the loser has got to pay the winner, the amount that was logged up.
And the game then continues to evolve. But this was last year's tournament winner who was very happy after.
Look at the happy smile.
Yeah, the trophy.
First-time player.
Yeah, first-time player.
We say the game is for 12 to adult, but what ages have we had kids?
As young as 7.
Kids.
Well, that's one of the other things about the board gaming industry.
Families.
And this resurgence that has been so great is how it brings people together. It gets people away from the screen time. And family activities, also with friends. You get all these people together playing different board games, and it does bring people together.
And, the thing is, it is an activity.
Yes.
Watching the television is not an activity, it's a passivity.
Right. And even talking on the laptop or on the computer or on your phone, you're not interacting with your family.
No, and the board games you are, and with young kids, it develops their cognitive abilities at a young age, and that's why we see with the families that board game together that come to these conventions, we find that they pick up the rules really quickly, even for a game like Binfa, which was designed for 12 and over. They pick up, 7-year-olds pick up this game and they just whiz away at it because they're familiar with those formats.
Right, and those are skills and executive functions that are going to help them the rest of their lives.
Yeah, and an activity and a hobby that, is a really great embracing community to be a part of. And the people that come often meet with friends that they've seen from all over the country, and they get together this once a year for these days of board gaming and try out new games, and there's always prototype sections. For people out there that are thinking about making their own game and using Kickstarter, having done a few campaigns on both Indiegogo, which is more of a charity-based platform, and Kickstarter, both of which are crowdfunding platforms, there were some valuable lessons that we learned in going forward with that. And one of them is building a story around why you've made your game or what your game is about, and making a really powerful video. The video really helps, but you can just make that on your phone at home. And then pre-promoting your campaign before you go live, letting all your family, your friends, your social network, people you went to school with, anybody that's interested in your board gaming groups or meetups to be aware of the campaign before it launches. And the most important thing is to, when you set your goal, make sure that you have commitments from family and friends and others that you're going to reach 30% of your goal within 24 hours.
Really?
Because that helps with that Kickstarter algorithm to push you forward, because there's so many activities, so many projects on Kickstarter. You want your project to be featured for it to fund. And you can always raise your limits later, so it's always better to start out with a lower limit to make sure you're getting that funding rolling.
And that's so much wonderful information for the beginning gamer.
Yeah, well, and don't give up. I mean, as you can see, 50 years he's been working on this, and it's changed, and it changed. Everything about the game has changed, and we still have thousands of people playing and loving it and enjoying it every year.
It's an interesting question, to me anyway, whether you discover the rules for a game or if you invent them. Because when I think about Binfa, the rules are there, like you have 60 supply units. Why 60? Why not 48? Well, that's arbitrary, but 60 seems to work. But so many aspects seem to be, have been there from the beginning, waiting to be discovered. So there's no sense in sweating it out and saying, oh, well, no. If it comes, it comes.
It comes, it comes.
And it keeps coming.
And so are you finding that as you watch other people play this game, does it change the rules? Does it change the supply numbers?
No, I wouldn't say so.
We've had some changes. Well, and a reviewer once had said, the game is basically, it's based on Sun Tzu's The Art of War.
Right.
And it's for 2 up to 6 players. And you have a supply sector and you have a battle sector. And one of the reviewers, quite a few years back, had said, there's no real motivation to leave that battle sector and go out into other territories. And because of that feedback, you decided to make it so that it changed the rules. So that feedback does help change the rules, as the process goes along. Definitely, and player input.
Yeah.
And so the reviewer that you had, is that just a general player, or is that a person who does game reviews all the time?
It was for a Games Review Journal. Yeah. But we've had many reviews, and a lot of them now are podcast reviewers, and you can find those. There's so many YouTube channels with people doing their own podcasts on game reviews.
I'd give a piece of advice. We are pretty good at this business, but we can only go so far. There are professionals who will write rules for you.
Really? And market it for you?
And it needs a professional. That's the hardest writing job there is. You don't want any redundant words,
Right.
but you don't want to leave anything out. So getting it right is very important.
And if rules are too complex, people won't play the game.
Well, and
And
it's
also the language you use. Now, I do it in sort of strictly prosaic language. When we got the rules taken, no, he talks about supply routes. That type of language.
It's also hard as the inventor to separate yourself because you know the game so well inside out that to write rules that somebody that's coming into it blind would understand. And this gentleman that we hired, William Niebling, was wonderful, and it was $50, I think, he charges as a technical rule writer to go over that. And it was just an invaluable investment into that game itself, which we really liked.
Let me say this about gaming people, and especially the ones who invent games. They're dreamers. You know, they have a dream.
Yes, very true.
And they work to make it a reality. And most of them, almost everybody fails.
Sure, it's very
but
rare.
that doesn't deter them.
That's a good thing.
It's so important to have a dream. Absolutely.
And one of the nice things, too, about the resurgence in game boarding and also these conventions, there's so many types of games. You can't just pigeonhole it as board gaming or Dungeons and Dragons. It's, you know, there's card games, there's kitty cat games, there's kid games, there's big Star Wars games that go on for hours and hours. There's Settlers of Catan, there's all these extensions, there's Cards Against Humanity. I mean, there's a game for everyone. There's so many different types of games.
At these conventions, we walk around and look at all the on display. The incredible complexity of some games. These people, they must be Einstein. I couldn't even begin. And so, here's the rule book. 3 inches thick. But people are buying it, people are playing it.
And people are having fun, and that's really
the bottom line.
The bottom line.
And you know what you see at some of these conventions also? You'll see somebody who's severely disabled in a wheelchair. And I think to myself, is this where you live? Is this where you have triumphs?
Yes.
You know what I mean? And defeats.
Like the rest of us?
Like the rest of us.
Right.
Yes.
It's true.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it's like a book. It brings you into a whole new world.
It does. It's a fantasy world that you get to be a part of, but you're doing it with other people. It's not like a virtual reality world.
What they call tabletop games, like Settlers of Catan. Because what this does is it educates you into making decisions.
And different types of decisions. And
all kinds of decisions. And it's sort of training for life, really.
Absolutely true. Or even older people who've had life could use some executive decisions.
Absolutely.
That's true. Well, and one of the nice things is even if you can't get to one of the conventions, there are so many places locally all across the country that do this. I mean, you just researched and found out that there have been 500 Board Games Cafe opened just in 2016.
Wow.
Microbreweries often have board gaming sections. Libraries now rent out games. There's Meetup has so many different board gaming nights and groups. And if there's a game that you really love, you can set up your own Meetup. And then lots of the local game stores, toy hobby stores, they always have game nights.
Well, you know how we met at the library.
We're doing the game.
Doing game night.
Anybody they want to be used.
In a small community, it was amazing how many people showed up.
Yes.
Yeah, it really was.
And they were all dedicated to learning the rules, having fun together.
Right, right. Although I must say, I think most people learn to play not by reading the rule book. You learn by playing with somebody who knows how to play.
That's
also why
we're lazy.
That's true.
That's also why we have a YouTube channel for Bin Fa, which not only has demos of us playing, but it also has lots of the reviewers and podcasters that review lots of games, not just ours, but the reviews of our games are on the Bin Fa, the Tao of War YouTube channel.
Would you recommend that for other people creating their own games?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And if they want games reviewed, if just even going on our YouTube channel, you can find lots of the main podcasters that you would want to submit your game to or your prototype game for review.
Even as early as a prototype game.
And I would definitely suggest going to some of the conventions, the local conventions. Just look up local gaming conventions in Google, and there's often manufacturers, distributors, and there's always a prototype section so that people can come and see what's new and give feedback. And that's when we did that. That was one of the. Before we had this game here. When we went to Board Game Geek in Dallas with, a box like this and pieces made up like that, just.
And they weren't too snitty about it?
No, no. And we sat at a table and he put up a little sign saying we're looking for play testers to see how it's working. And, they make it very easy for you. As my dad said, people are so friendly and so willing to help. It's
and
very
they're not
embracing.
harsh or discouraging.
Games players, they come in two types. There are those who just play for the enjoyment, but there is a smaller group, and they've got to win. It's all about winning.
It's all about winning.
Nothing, no other consideration comes into it. And they sort of tend to be persnickety in their thing. Here's an example. We just got a letter, an email from somebody had bought a Binfar game, and it says there are 60 supply units. Well, he counted them, and there are only 59. So we got a letter from him. So I pasted a single supply onto the card and I mailed it. I hope he's happy. But that's the type of thinking. And when, if at a new group, if I'm explaining Binfar, they're yards ahead with their questions. So I hadn't even thought of that, but they've got that certain type of mindset, and it comes easy to them.
And they're happy to be involved with you.
So what was our friend there? He had about 50 games in his mind. He was familiar with.
Paul Marshall, he was wonderful. He went to all the conventions. He retired and just spent his
He was our biggest fan.
He would go to every convention in America. He would just go from one convention to the other playing games. He'd spent his life working in the Social Security office.
And the most cheerful, happy guy you ever wished to meet.
Yeah, and everyone's just.
And then we heard he died suddenly. We were very struck by that.
Wow,
that was a shame.
It's so wonderful that you've met so many people that you would never have met under other circumstances.
Well, I mean, it even gets involved in pop culture too. You get a lot of games that are branded with pop culture, and there's gaming sections even at Comic-Con here in San Diego. There is a small gaming section there, and I don't think you have to have a Comic-Con ticket to access that gaming room. I think it's in the Marriott Hotel. They have it every year.
Oh, goodness gracious. I know where I'm going to be this year.
Yeah, that's great.
Well, we're coming down closer to the end of it, so let me review what we've been talking about. This is Ken and his daughter, Erica, who have created this wonderful game, Binfar, 50 years ago, and has given us wonderful information about the exciting world of gaming, which is now a $12 billion industry, and how people are just delighted to help you and continue the whole gaming world with you. And so if you are creating a game here in San Diego, you have opportunities that never existed. Up until now, the Kickstarter opportunities, the feedback from the local gaming companies, or even the national events. Conventions. So, Ken, what would you like to tell people about the whole gaming industry? Or about your games in particular?
I would just paraphrase Winston Churchill. Never give up. Never give up. Never give up. Once you give up, you've lost. If you haven't given up, you haven't lost.
So and if it's your passion, you want to keep going with it, and just keep working at it, and take it and play it and keep developing it.
Oh, speaking very briefly, tell me how the reading game, who helped you, why did you create the reading game?
Well, the reading game, at its root, besides being a games inventor, my dad is the author of the vocabulary textbook series, Wordly Wise. It's a vocabulary curriculum that's used in over 10,000 school systems in the United States, and very into...
Over 50 years old.
Yes, also over 50 years old as well. And the reading game was really to get kids a head start on reading and make that first experience with reading an enjoyable one. So it's a game where you... memory matching concentration type of game that teaches you Dolch and Frye high frequency sight words, and then at the end of playing the game the child is handed a book, and that book is told using only the 30 words that they've learned through gameplay. So when they get that book, they're not going to struggle or hesitate or become frustrated. They're going to read that book from start to finish and feel great about it and make that first reading experience a positive one.
Fun. Now, wasn't the certain 4-year-old involved in reading some of her first books? Tell me that story.
Daughter.
Yes.
She was the first one to test it on.
He developed it for my daughter, and now it's won over 10 awards, and it's sold in stores across America, and Amazon, Target, Walmart, and
everywhere.
Your local toy retailer.
Touching letters from people. A 12-year-old boy who still couldn't read and exhausted. He got the reading game. He was reading.
He was excited.
A 12-year-old kid. She said, I wanted to test him, but he refused to be tested. I said, no, that poor kid's been tested to death. He's got to 12 and he still can't read. We taught him to read.
Literally.
And the books aren't babyish, which is one of the nice things, especially if you do have a struggling reader. They're not babyish books that make you feel bad when you're 8 or 9 years old. And we do get many emails and feedback from parents that say, "Oh, my 7-year-old son, really wasn't reading, and we did this, and he loved it. He, thought he was playing a game, and I cried. Hallelujah!" I mean, we really get some heartwarming emails.
Point here: a lot of educational material, they're sort of farmed out by publishers, and they pay them cash to do the job. It used to be royalties. I still get royalties for my books. Oh. But it's, I've lost the thread of what I was.
Well, it's basically what they do is they hire teams of writers. So there's not an organic idea behind writing these materials.
The creative aspect is missing.
Ah, I see.
Which is what intrigues children to learn.
Of course.
And that's really the secret of the Wordly Wise reading
and the success of the Wordly Wise books after over 50 years, because it's all part of one ginormous
focused effort to get them happy to be reading.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Another interesting story, the first edition of the reading game, we had a friend in that store. We said, "We're going to do a new edition.
Barnes & Noble.
Any suggestions?" And she said, "Yeah, change the color. Make it bright yellow."
I made it yellow.
We did.
Yeah, that's a
good advice.
So there's always an evolution when you're going on and doing a new publication or a new print run. So we always can think of new things that we'd like to add in or change to make it better.
So you too can develop a game and continue to have new aspects of it that make it more marketable and can make people enjoy playing the games as their families. Well, thank you for being with us here today. This has been Powerful People of San Diego with Ken Hodkinson and his wonderful daughter, Erica Bird. Thanks for being with us, and we'll see you guys here next time playing a game.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.